You're busy, you've got a decent practice, but nobody wants to be decent. You want to be great, and you want to have a great practice. So how did the most productive, profitable dentist in the nation balance real life, work, and profits, and somehow make it all seem fun? Well, it comes down to simple, everyday practices. So grab a lunch, join us as we chat with top clinicians and influencers to discover their formula for uncommon success. Are you ready? Then it's time to explore everyday practices.
Welcome to Everyday Practices. I'm Reagan Robertson, President and CMO with Productive Dentist Academy. I'm your host today, along with my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson. Chad, how are you doing today?
Hello, virtual world.
Oh,
I'm doing all right, yeah.
Sounds very sincere.
Well,
We're going to give Chad a second to catch his breath because he has been outside for the past hour and a half in 50-degree weather.
Yep, rough life. It's good. We're making the kids' trampoline outdoors, so that way they can burn off some energy, build up some leg strength.
It's a very, very good idea. So it made me remember that we have a trampoline in our garage that has not been put together either. So I think I just added
Rustin.
list as well.
Yeah,
So
come on.
Thank you for coming back inside, Chad, with us. We have a special guest for you today. Dr. Angela, how do I say your last name? Mulrooney, is that right?
Mulrooney. Yep, that's correct.
Beautiful. I'm gonna let you share your story with us today. I did not personally meet Dr. Angela at Jumpstart Dental, the Dental Speakers Institute event that goes on annually, and but you did, Chad, right?
Yeah, and Dr. Angelo gave a wonderful presentation followed by something I've never seen before. So that was spectacular. Some contemporary dance. We were talking before we hit record and I was like, was that like interpretive? Because the idea was that it was kind of interpreting your story and stuff like that. And I could get that out of the dance and stuff like that. So that was really cool that you brought something very unique to your speaking. Have you been able to present that more than just at Jumpstart 2020?
I haven't done the dancing part of it. The story, though, has been presented many times.
Yes. So explain to people why dance.
Well, actually, my background, like when I finished dental school, I actually turned professional as a dancer, and I actually didn't start dancing until I was 18. And so when I became a dentist, I was dancing half-time and doing dentistry full-time. And then with the presentation that I did, they wanted me to go beyond just like the emotional story. They want to be able to kind of give that extra punch with the dance part of it, which
of course
apparently sealed the deal because I couldn't see everyone in the crowd with the bright lights, but apparently everyone was crying. So yeah.
Right.
So apparently it was effective.
And
are you the dancing doctor on Instagram?
No, I'm not actually, but I've been called that for a long, long time, the dancing dentist. But
I love that.
The dancing dentist. Yeah.
Shout out to Rich Constantine for that.
I know, when he came on stage, I was like, that's my name. What are you doing?
Not now.
Yeah.
Oh, brother. So you're up in Calgary. And another interesting thing, Reagan, that Dr. Angela and I were talking about when we were on a phone call about a month ago was talking about the difference between numbing and freezing.
So
Canadians call it, freezing more often than not. And we talk about numbing, but like we're all talking about the same thing, but it sounds funny when we talk about numbing and it sounds funny to us when they talk about freezing something.
It does. It makes me think we say that you freeze like your warts. Like if you get a wart.
Oh,
actual freezing it.
Actual freezing. But Dr. Angela, does she buffer her anesthetic with sodium bicarbonate?
That wasn't available before I retired. It was available in the US and it wasn't available in Canada.
All right. So you bring something up for the listeners. It introduces into your story. You said before you retired, and just so everyone knows, if they see your picture before they hit click on the podcast to listen to it, you're not old. So,
thank you.
Well, I mean, it's easy to say. I mean, I'm not even trying to flatter you. You're not old. So it's like retired. Wait a second. What? So let's back up and please tell us about your story. Let's go back 10, 11 years ago. What was going on?
So let's go 12 years ago. I'd been an associate for 4.5 years by that point, and I was an extremely shy person, so I focused on little kids because I didn't really have to have spontaneous conversation with them. I could just tell them stories and everything was great. They loved me and they would keep coming back. And then I happened into this practice where one of my old bosses actually needed me to take over a locum for him. And it was for a 78-year-old dentist. So I was 5 decades junior to the dentist who needed a locum, and walked into this situation that I had no idea what I was getting myself into until he opened the door to the practice, and it was just chaos. Like the carpet that at one point should have been beige was black because they just didn't bother to clean it.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah, everything was 40 years old.
Yep.
But the funny thing is, the more time I spent in there, the more I could just see potential in the situation.
Of course. Good for you.
Yeah, and I had no intention ever of actually buying a practice until I walked into this space. And then I was like, no, this is mine. So I decided to buy the practice, and it was the kind of dentistry that was being done for the previous 3 years was awful. He couldn't see very well at that point anymore. So everything was being placed on decay. Uh-huh. So majority of the work that was in there had to be replaced. And a lot of it was being done pro bono by me because I felt bad that they had paid him for it, and they kind of they didn't get swindled. It was just
unbeknown.
They weren't getting the best care.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we all get, you know what, you're in good company here. So it's not like you have to be like, oh, how do I put this? It's like, we get that you're being polite about it, and that's awesome. But we understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I decided, after seeing all this potential, I decided to buy the practice and started investing my heart and soul into it. And in a year, I worked harder than I ever had in my life when I was an associate, and started turning the practice around into this high-end, high-tech practice, started investing in my skill set. And by the end of the first year, I'd done a really good job. I had increased production by 73%. And
wow.
It was not something that should have been really possible because I was in the worst part of town, like the seriously worst part of town.
Very cool. I mean, you know, cool that you're doing that in spite of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything was teetering along, very lovely. And then I got 2 registered letters in the mail. Oh. And I had never gotten one before. So I thought this was like a landmark of being a business owner. So I was actually pretty excited about this, and took them into my office and opened the first one and started to read it, and lay down on the floor in my office, opened the second one and started to read it. And my world just came crashing down.
Wow.
2 of the employees that I'd inherited from the old dentist were suing me for $150,000 for wrongful dismissal.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
And I had been like rose-colored glasses until that point. Like I could save the world.
Yes.
Until that point. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, I'm going to lose everything.
Wow.
It's like when, have you ever heard of like, UFC fighters will say that, or boxers will say that, like you're is only as good up to you the first time you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And I can just picture that in my head, you know, everything's going strong and then you get stunned with this. So were you surprised? I mean, you didn't see this coming.
I didn't see it coming. Not at all. I was naive. I just thought, you know, if you treat the employees well, everything will be fine.
And we're all on the same team. We're all on the same page. They yes. like me. I like them.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was part of the problem was we were converting from 1960s dentistry
yes.
to
yes.
the 2000s dentistry, right? So it was a huge culture shift for them, and there was a lot of resistance.
Of course.
No matter how much I tried to invest in them, there was resistance, and then it came to a head where I had to let them go. And then 3 months later, which was almost like it wasn't very long after the 1-year anniversary of owning the practice, that I got the registered letters. And so that really an adrenaline rush that had been on that first year, suddenly it got cut off, and it was paralyzing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
so after that, then everything went smoothly the rest of your career, and
sure, we'll go with that.
So that's the story. So this was, you know, this was a trying time. I mean, did it go to court? Did it go like how like what? I mean, as much as I get, or as little as you want to share, but please do tell.
It carried on for 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And eventually the 2 who came after me, their lawyer got pregnant, and a new lawyer took over their case and said, "What are you guys doing?" And we ended up getting a letter from the new lawyer saying, "We will settle this for $0 as long as you sign off on not suing us back." So they didn't have a case the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
But they had a lawyer who felt that they did. But the first lawyer that I had was willing to give them the moon. And then my friends were all going like, this, you haven't done anything wrong. Like, this doesn't make sense why she wants to give them so much. Yep. So enough of them kind of like kicked me along and said like, go find someone else. And I ended up getting someone else who took the whole case and was like, Angela, you don't talk to me. You don't call me. You don't email me. If there's something that you need to know, I will get a hold of you. But you've already rung up like a $40,000 bill in 2 months because this lawyer kept calling me and ringing up the bill. I didn't even know what she was doing. So he shut it down and was like, you're only going to deal with me if you actually need to deal with me.
Was that your lawyer that was ringing you up and you were getting charged? Oh, heavens.
Yeah. And I was naive and I was in complete disarray. Like, my world had gone from sunshine to chaos. And I just thought, well, this lawyer had been recommended to me. So I thought she was doing the right thing and I didn't know better.
And just to put in perspective too, this is 40,000 Canadian dollars.
Yes.
So let's say it was $50,000 and this was also 12-ish years ago. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this isn't 50,000 of today's US dollars. This is probably, $75,000 or $80,000 worth of today's money back then.
Exactly.
I mean, just to make sure that people get, there's just like, not just,
Yeah. And in Canada, people don't sue that often. So it was kind of heartbreaking because of that. Like, in the States, it happens more often. In Canada, it's not very, very common.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So 2.5 years later, now you've got this behind you. What about that? How did that first week go? Was that liberating when you got back to work? I mean, were things going pretty peachy then again?
Yeah. And I had rallied and gotten the rest of my clinic in line, but it was like having an albatross around your neck that whole time. It was like, am I going to have to pay out this $150,000? Like, how much more are my lawyer fees going to go up? It was a lot of stuff, but my way of dealing with stress is like, I'm going to take on a project. So my project was to turn this practice into my dream practice and serve the patients that needed me. And that's what I did. So by the time that thing got settled out, it was a huge relief. Like, it was like taking a 1,000-pound lead jacket off and moving forward with my life with lightness and love again. And things went really well until not much longer after that. Then I came across another hurdle in my life.
Oh, okay. Let's cross the bridge together. I'm virtually holding your hand in this COVID-19 era. Tell us what in the world at that point. I mean, we know, but tell us.
So I started to have pain in my drilling hand.
Oh.
And it was like, at the end of the day, I couldn't type my notes. At the end of the day, I could barely hold my drill, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And as a professional dancer, you just push through things, right? Because the show must go on. You have to get on stage unless you actually like have a bone fractured in half. And I'm like, well, nothing's fractured in half, so I'm going to gut it out and keep going. And so I did that for 4 months. And I don't know if you've ever had like 10 out of 10 pain where the pain spikes so much that it actually starts making you puke. But that's what I was dealing with for 4 months. So I was a mess physically and emotionally from the stress. And then it came to a Thursday morning where I had a patient who had been waiting to see me, a phobic patient. And I really didn't want to go in because I was in so much pain, but she had been waiting. So I felt like I owed it to her.
And you've said before that you kind of started to get known at that point, not just for having a knack with children, but also because of working well with children. Then you were given phobic patients and you'd work through them. And now you've got this patient in your chair. Yes. And it was a 5-hour procedure. So we had her flapped open, we had recontoured bone, we had, it was quite extensive. And when it was time to sew her back up, because everything had gone beautifully, I reached for my hemostat. And when I turned over my hand, my hemostat wasn't actually there. So I watched my hand and told it to pick up the hemostat, and it wouldn't listen. And in that moment, I realized this was a tipping point. Mm-hmm. The past 4 months had been hell, but now this was very different than what I'd been experiencing. So I looked over at my assistant and I motioned her for her to come out and said to her, well, the problem I've been having the last 4 months,
guess what? My hand isn't working at all right now. So my plan is I'm going to use my left hand, and I'll tell you what you need to do from the other side, and we're going to get the patient put back together and safe. And she, of course, looked at me with eyes like saucers and
Right.
yeah, like, you're insane, Angela, but okay, because we couldn't leave the patient in the state that
What's
she
our
was
other
in.
option? Of course.
You collected your wits. You collected your wits and did what you needed to do to get the job done.
Yeah,
I love can-do people. Yep.
Yeah, we went back into the room, picked up the hemostat with my left hand, and picked up my suture needle and threw my first stitch. And it actually worked. And then I threw the other 6, and we got her put back together. And of course, we let the patient know everything had gone perfect according to plan. But that was, as the door closed behind her, my whole world started to swim, because I knew this was entering a different level that I'd been going through the last 4 months.
Wow. Oh, okay. So then I imagine you had specialist visits and jazz like that.
Yes. And in Canada, it takes a long time to get in with specialists. So I was getting in with one specialist and then another, and they don't work collaboratively together to figure out the problem. Mm-hmm. So they were each seeing it from their viewpoint and not putting the pieces together. Mm-hmm. So by the end of 6 months, I didn't have a diagnosis. I didn't have my insurance paying out because we didn't have a diagnosis. I decided to be a hero and keep my staff on full time, even though there was like $10,000 to $15,000 worth of production a month happening. And that was it.
There's some application there. So how did that work out? Right.
By the end of 6 months, I was a week away from handing my keys over to the bank. Yep. And by that point, I had sold everything I owned, down to my knives and forks and plates. I was eating water mixed with flour instead of real food because I couldn't afford real food. For real. Yeah. And it turns out I'm actually quite allergic to gluten, so that was a really bad thing. And had to sell my house and everything. So it was pretty scary at that point.
Just to hash that out too, because I mean, with stuff that people are going through, there's this feeling that because we're the leader of the ship, that we need to go down with the ship and we need to be virtuous down to the last breath and everything like that, keeping staff on board would eventually, because I'm sure they were pleased to know that you were paying them for the 6 months. When those 6 months got done, were they still disappointed in you?
Honestly, once things got back on track, those staff that I had lost everything to keep on disappeared one by one. Mm-hmm.
So in other words, what I'm saying is when we're balancing our COVID stuff right now and what to do about it and when to cut losses, at least temporarily, I think we are prone to wanting to say, okay, let's do everything that we can to keep everyone and let's pay everyone full rate, full time, and then everyone will be happy. And it's just like, yeah, but then at some point when that money runs out real quick, then they're not going to be happy with you at that point. So in other words, we got to do what we got to do. And I hate to put it that way, but it's true.
It is true. And there's a lot of people, like in Calgary, everything is very oil based. So people that I consult with here, there's been lots who have been on the verge of the same situation that I am, except they didn't have the health part of it. It was just economics and mismanagement of the practices. And they want to keep everyone on full time. And I'm like, you're just slitting your wrists and letting yourself bleed out by doing that. Instead of actually, like, if you can save part of it by pulling back a little bit, people will understand, right? And there will be guilt at first, of course, but
of course,
if your clinic tanks completely, everyone's going to be out of work anyway.
Yep.
So why not stop the bleed a little bit sooner and see what you can do to recover? Yeah. Yep.
So what listeners can't see right now, but I fortunately, and Chad can see, Dr. Angela, this is what's staring at us is this bright-eyed, beautiful soul with a sunny disposition. So the story that you're hearing right now, it makes my heart hurt. It actually makes me, a little teary, understanding what business owners have to go through. And it's one of the reasons that I firmly believe in what I do so much in our organization, because of stories like this. So, but you made it. There's obviously a silver lining here.
Yeah.
That you kept going forward, right? So, so you got to this point, and what happened next?
So after after the 6 months being at bankruptcy's doorstep, I decided to throw a Hail Mary, and I'm like, I need to get this figured out. Otherwise I'm going to lose everything anyway. So might as well throw a little bit of money at the problem and rack up my credit a little bit further. So I decided to fly myself down to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale and seen by specialists there. And within the first day, they had a working diagnosis, and then they confirmed it after 3 days of poking and prodding and electrocuting me to figure out what was wrong.
All in love.
All in love, yes. No, it was for a good cause, but it was a torturous few days, to be honest.
So let's say then that you start getting your health back in order. Then, so where did business go from there? I mean, are your hands back to working order, or did you have to find a plan C?
Yeah, it was definitely plan C. So it turns out I have focal dystonia. So what it is, it actually acts like a brain injury. So if you have a genetic predisposition to this, if you overuse your manual dexterity in jobs like surgery, dentistry, writing, musician work, then you actually damage the brain and the chemistry reverses. So now what should relax contracts, and vice versa with my hand. So trying to control a pen is nearly impossible. So let alone trying to control a $500 or 500 RPM drill. It doesn't work out very well. So yeah, my career ended, well, it ended 6 months before that, but the final nail was put into the coffin at that point.
Yeah. I mean, because finding patients at that point, once you've explained that, they're not going to be all too happy to have you work on them. That's a joke, but it was like really, really bad. I'm sorry. But all right. So then what was your plan? I mean, you're like, okay, well, I like eating and I like paying, for things that I want. So I need to, make a buck. What did your heart tell you? What did your head tell you?
My head told me, Kate, we have a new project to take on. Let's figure this out. My heart was honestly broken every day that I went in there, because I'd wanted to be a dentist since I was 2, and I was 32 when this happened. So that was like a gigantic dream that just evaporated overnight. So I kept putting one foot in front of the other, showing up at the practice and trying to do what I could. And then it came to a point where actually the situation that Calgary's in right now with oil prices still being low, like when oil prices tanked in 2015, I decided, I've given it my best shot. I can't do this anymore. So I decided to sell the practice and figure out what I want to be when I grew up again.
And what did that involve?
That involved taking a year off and starting a dance company.
Yes.
I'd always taught since I was out of school, but I didn't have an official company. So I launched Unleashed Dance Company, which the name came from being like unleashed from expectations of my life, being unleashed from being a dentist and being unleashed from my dream, while also trying to help other people find that freedom in their life. So that was my year after I sold the practice. I just wanted to step away from dentistry. I didn't really talk to anyone about dentistry. I didn't talk to my colleagues. I just needed to have that break from all the pain.
So I have a question then. I'm sorry, Reagan. I am very much hogging this.
You're not hogging it, Chad. I am mesmerized, and I think
I am too. My mesmerization keeps on just going question, and yours might, be like just stunning and stuff. Well, maybe it's the second time that I've heard it. So you've gone through it ahead of us, and now here a lot of people have their identity in dentistry.
Yes.
And now we're going, crud, we're unemployed. And from clinical work, we're all employed in making our business still happen and whatnot. But that's where you were. So this isn't your first rodeo with this. Let's say that there's a dentist that's 5 years out of school and he's got a bunch of bills. Talk to that dentist about, being a mentor in this kind of situation. What would you tell them?
Talk to the professionals and listen to them. Cut every expense that you possibly can right now. It's not going to feel nice. It's trying to save yourself. It's going to feel extremely selfish, but it is actually for the sake of your patient base and for the sake of your team down the line. It's actually one of the most selfless things you can be doing is saving yourself.
Yes.
And like everything will be okay eventually, right?
Yes.
if they do the right things now, they'll be better faster when
Yes.
things get back on track.
Ooh,
If
I
they
like that.
keep leave themselves dry financially, they're not going to get better faster.
Yes.
So if, that old saying, a stitch in time saves 9, that's what people need to be doing right now. And they need to do what is absolutely necessary to prevent future pain.
Yes.
For the ones who don't know who they are right now, like luckily you haven't had your career taken away from you permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And I do get it. Like I was spinning out of control for almost 2 years after I lost my ability to practice. And then even when I sold my practice, I was just like, I don't even know who I am.
Yes.
So it took a long time to get back down to the identity of what makes me me.
Yes.
Because everything was, I'm Angela, the dentist, right? Or I'm Angela, the dancer. And it was hard trying to figure out who that was. And everyone's like, but you're awesome. And I'm like, but I'm not awesome. I was awesome as a dentist.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm awesome as a regular human being,
Yes.
Oh my
I think
gosh.
there's going to be a lot of people that identify with that. Regan, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the exact same thing, Chuck.
Yep.
I have heard that story many times, not your story, but take away. Victoria says, separating, what does she say? She says, your net worth does not define your self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you think of net worth as what you do to produce dollars, and identify with that so strongly. I mean, I know what I identify with, and my career has made really drastic changes over the last 15 years. And it's taken me really wonderful places. And there have been times where I'm not doing what I was known for doing. And so that's very confusing. And it's really heartwarming to hear another woman say quite candidly, vulnerably, openly, I felt lost. I didn't have my identity anymore because of this. So I think you're going to reach a lot of listeners by sharing this story and showing what's on the other side. I've talked to men doctors that they've cried on the phone with me because they can't practice dentistry anymore, or they chose not to, thinking it was the right move, and now they feel lost because they're trying to find themselves. It's a whole other dynamic.
Yeah. The biggest thing I learned, honestly, from all of it, and I've been through some other ups and downs, is that, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to go through this. And if you can always remember what the basics are that make you happy, that is what you need to stick to, because you can get zeroed at any point as an entrepreneur. We don't have any guarantees. It's a risky thing to do. That's why not everyone does it, or not everyone succeeds at it. Yep. But even anyone who's been super successful has had amazing highs and devastating lows where they've lost everything and had to rebuild again. Whether it was a bad business decision, it was health, it was external circumstances. But when you lose everything, you actually get a lot smarter, not just because you have to get scrappy, but you realize you need nothing to survive, right? You could live out of a backpack and you could be totally fine. And so all these things that, especially people who make a lot of money, they're always accumulating these things that reflect their wealth. When you lose all that, you realize that stuff is just stuff,
Being at home right now, since listeners, this is taped during obviously the pandemic and self-isolation quarantines going on. And my husband asked, he said, do you want me to go get some food for us? And I was like, well, why? We have tons of food here. Why would we do that? And I never would have thought of that before. It's always, let's go out, let's go do this. And starting to pay attention to how much we spent going out. Oh my goodness, we do not need what we think we need.
Angela, I don't know if you noticed, but you did an Alexander Hamilton quote when you talked about being scrappy, young and scrappy, just like my country. And so I don't know if you've seen that yet, but
I haven't.
It's a really good show. So I have a question for you. Do you have any favorite books over the last year that you've read that have, I don't care if it's business or not, but have there been any books that have really stood out to you in the last year?
There's one that's kind of stood out to me over the last decade.
Yes, I'll take it. That's
that
even
I
better.
read over and over again, which is The 4-Hour Workweek.
Nice.
And it's not about trying to just work 4 hours. Really, the essence of that book for me is simplifying life. simplify your processes, simplify everything that is around you, simplify everything that you do in a day so that you have time to like live your life.
You know, I notice someone's website, and so I'm going to throw you a softball pitch, and then you can follow it up. Ready? So
Okay.
how can someone earn an extra $20,000 per month and work 50% less?
By getting themselves streamlined.
Well,
You're totally reading my website.
I know, right? So tell us from unleashingdentistry.com how people, can get a hold of you and what kind of consulting you do.
So if they want to get a hold of me, everyone kind of goes through my assistant because I am really good at messing up my own schedule. So you can send Christina a message at info@helpgetmepationtsnow.com, which is PATIENTS, not like kind of patients.
Patients.
Yes, helpgetmepatientsnow.com. And anyone who is needing help, like especially right now, we have broadcasts 2-3 times a week right now in the evenings. We've got like a happiness broadcast at 1 p.m. So if people are needing to connect and just hear advice or good news or whatever, there's those options. And of course, if you want to speak one-on-one with me, I'm happy to give you a free hour of my time to help you to move through this and get to the other side as safely and painlessly as possible.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We also have one more question for you. And
Sure.
It's something special that we ask on our show. Reagan, would you like to take that?
I would love to take it.
Uh-oh.
I know. She's like, what? It's no big deal.
You just answer with your gut, okay? Whatever first
Okay.
into your head. Bacon or eggs?
Eggs.
Eggs. We've got another
Got it, eggs.
Yeah. Well,
You keep
Dr.
track
Angela,
quick?
you know what? I circle, like I take notes, so like basically someday I take notes and I write stuff down and I circle whether bacon or eggs and I write down everyone's favorite book and stuff like that. So I don't have like a full tally like on a marker board but I should. We've always talked about that. I think we're only, like 70-ish episodes in. We really should.
Yeah.
I bet it's 50-50.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Angela, thank you so much for joining us today and kind of sharing through, like, what's cool is through your pain, you've basically gone through this rodeo before. So some people might be like, oh man, this really sucks. And it's just like, yeah, life sucks sometimes. And it's what we do with it. And so what's cool is to see your success story and then to also share as a mentor with people, listen, I got through it. You can get through it. So I'm proud of you for getting through it. And I'm also glad to see that you're a success story. You are still a dentist. You are still valuable just as a person and everything like that. And I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for getting to meet you at the Dental Speakers Institute Jumpstart 2020 and to get to know you better. So thank you. Do you have any closing thoughts for anyone or anything like that?
My closing thought, honestly, would just be hang in there.
I love it.
It will eventually be okay.
Yeah, I love it. Well, to all of our listeners for Everyday Practices, thanks for joining us on this podcast, and we'll look forward to hearing us next week.
Bring your lunch or take us to the gym again next week to improve your everyday practices. Also, subscribe on iTunes, follow us on social media, and sign up for our email list. Now get out there and win with Everyday Practices.